Something that seems to be big when it comes to training and sport at the minute is the importance of core strength. And the idea seems to be that by working these core muscles and strengthening them, then playing sport is better and easier. And when you get to Psalm 16, I think we get a picture on how to approach life in a better way with God as our core. You know, and often in life it can be easy to have God slip down the list of priorities, where he ends up just being on the periphery of things. But right at the beginning of this psalm, we see for David that his safety, his refuge, the best thing he could have, his core, is the Lord. And in verse 8 he says, "That's where my eyes are fixed." And it makes me think straight away, what is our core? In our life, what do we have our eyes fixed on? In what ways do we align to God in our life? And throughout these psalms, we've tried to explore different ways to do that. Through prayer, praise and reflection, to name a few, ways that we can connect to the source, to the living streams of water that we read about in Psalm 1. And when we do these things, they help us to connect, to fix our eyes on God, and then to have him as our core. But then what does that mean practically for life? Well, in this psalm, we see three ways that it plays out for David. It allows him to live life faithfully, it allows him to live with gratitude, and it allows him to live life with hope. In this psalm then, there seems to be a couple of groups of people. There are those who David delights in, and then there are those who David looks to not be swayed by. And with his eyes fixed on God and having him at his core, it means that he has this desire to live faithfully, to say, "You are my true focus and you are my best thing, and so because of that I won't compromise. I won't follow their gods or their practices. I'm faithful to you." And you know, I think living faithfully for us means to have our eyes open to what's going on around us. And if what's going on around us doesn't match God's ways or ideals, then with a community of people who we can take a delight in, and with our eyes fixed on God as our core, it allows us to approach that without compromising and living faithfully to him. Second thing then we see is it allows us to live with gratitude. G.K. Chesterton said that the critical thing in life is whether you take things for granted or take them with gratitude. David looks at his portion and his cup. He looks at how the boundary lines have fallen. He seems to look around him at his life and what he has and in his relationship with God, and he recognises that it's good. And from what we know of David and his life, there would have been lots of time in life that wasn't so good, and many of the Psalms certainly read that way. But there's a sense here that with God as his core and as his focus, David looks at life and he's thankful. And you know, in life at times it can be so easy just to leave God out of the equation, just to take what we have and what we experience for granted without a second thought to God. And a critical thing should be having gratitude to God. Gratitude for who he is, for the good that we have in our lives, and for the good that we have in him, even when life doesn't look so good. With our eyes fixed on God and keeping him as our core, we can find ourselves then being able to live life with gratitude. And finally then, it means that we can live with hope. And in the psalm, David says that not even the grave can separate him from God. With his eyes fixed on God and keeping him as his core, it allows him to live with this hope, knowing that God's love for him and care for him will never abandon him, even in death. And this kind of hope in life and in death can only come from God. And in Jesus, that's something we see most clearly as he defeats death. In his death, he takes on the death and abandonment from God so we wouldn't have to experience that. And in his resurrection then, we have ultimate hope in life and in death. And through him, there is joy in God's presence and eternal pleasures at his right hand. So what is it that's your focus or core? The picture we get here is that with our eyes fixed on God and having him as our core and life flowing out of him, then it allows us to live life faithfully, with gratitude and with hope.